friends, this is Pastor Jamie with Tempe First United Methodist Church. Welcome to this devotion during this Holy Week. And I really enjoyed the Palm Sunday cantata, and I hope you did as well. And just as a reminder, we have a couple of different options for you regarding Good Friday worship. We are having self-guided prayer stations at the church on Good Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And just feel free to drop by during any of that time frame, and you will be able to walk through those stations. If you do come, please plan to wear a mask. Some of us are not fully vaccinated and would appreciate if you take steps to keep all of us safe. And likewise, we will have a recorded service with similar content as the guided prayer stations, and that will be recorded and will be put on our church website, tempefirst.umc.org, as well as on our YouTube channel. So that will be made available for you in the morning, and feel free to watch anytime you are able on or after Good Friday. And then for Easter, we will have a recorded Easter worship service, and that will be shown on Zoom, like always, but you can also access that on on our website and on YouTube as well. So access that just like you would a regular Sunday service. So friends, for this Holy Week devotion, I thought I would talk about one of the events that we often associate with Holy Week. And this is the woman who breaks the jar of perfume over Jesus' feet and foretells of his burial and his death. So let me read for you, or with you, from Matthew chapter 26, and I'm starting in verse 1. It says, "When Jesus finished speaking all these words, he said to his disciples, 'You know the Passover is 2 days from now, and the human one, i.e. Jesus, will be handed over to be crucified.' Then the chief priests and elders of the people gathered in the courtyard of Caiaphas the high priest. They were plotting to arrest Jesus by cunning tricks and to kill him. But they agreed that it shouldn't happen during the feast so that there would not be an uproar among the people." And now verse 6. "When Jesus was at Bethany visiting the house of Simon, who had a skin disease, a woman came to him with a vase made of alabaster containing very expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' head while sitting at dinner. Now when the disciples saw it, they were angry and said, 'Why this waste? This perfume could have been sold for a lot of money and given to the poor.' But Jesus knew what they were thinking. He said, 'Why do you make trouble for the woman? She has done a good thing for me. You always have the poor with you, but you won't always have me. By pouring this perfume over my body, she's prepared me to be buried. I tell you the truth that wherever in the whole world this good news is announced, what she's done will also be told in memory of her.' Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, 'What will you give me if I turn Jesus over to you?' They paid him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, he was looking for an opportunity to turn him in." So friends, during this story, we encounter 3 kind of interesting people. And we encounter a leper, we encounter a woman, and we encounter a traitor. And while Jesus' encounters with these people weren't significant to his relationship with their religious authorities, they do give us insight on what it means to be followers of Christ. These are ordinary people living ordinary lives in ordinary places. So let's look a few moments at each of these characters and see what we might learn from this story. So first, let us consider the leper. So in this account from Matthew, we are told that the dinner happens at Simon's house, but we don't know a ton about him. We know that he lived in Bethany. We also know that he had leprosy at some point. But beyond that, we don't know so much. But let us take a moment to unwrap what we do know. So as I mentioned, we know that Simon's house is in Bethany, which is a few miles from Jerusalem. And we know that Jesus was traveling toward Jerusalem because he was ultimately crucified in Jerusalem. And Bethany is the place that Scripture tells us where Jesus spent the night during his last week. It was where he stayed before he died. And Bethany was also the home of Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha. And Lazarus was the one, according to the Gospel of John, that Jesus loved very much and raised from the dead. And Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, were also important to Jesus. So it's possible that they were invited to Simon's house on that night. And friends, we also know that Simon had leprosy, and this was a disease thought to be highly contagious. And those who had leprosy were considered unclean by the Jews. They had to go around, as they were moving about the city, yelling, "Unclean, unclean," and were given directions to stay far away from anyone and everyone, including their family. And they certainly weren't to be touched. And people avoided lepers, but Jesus didn't, right? Jesus not only touched Simon, but dined with him. And so there's some thought that maybe Simon had previously had leprosy, but Jesus healed him. But nonetheless, Jesus encountered Simon in his leprous state. So as we think about Simon, we think about people who are on the margins of our society. And we too have people on the margins of our society. But who are the people on the margins in your world? Are they the homeless, the sick, maybe the disabled or the mentally ill? People of different races? And as we think about that, we remember that Jesus teaches us through his relationship with Simon the leper that we are meant to be in relationship with those who are on the margins in our world. And secondly, in the story, we encounter the woman who anointed Jesus with oil. And in John's gospel, he tells the same story, but gives more details. In John's gospel, he names this woman Mary, the sister of Lazarus. But in Matthew's gospel, she's simply called the woman with an extraordinary gift, an alabaster jar full of expensive perfume. And when she broke it over Jesus' head, the disciples were livid. They thought that it was a waste and that the oil could have been sold to give money to the poor. But Jesus understood the significance of her gift, her extravagant generosity that was meant to honor him. And so friends, I'm wondering, how have we been extravagantly generous with what God has given us? And I'm talking about our time, about our talent, and the gifts that God has given us. Extravagant generosity means giving more than we promised to give. It is about sacrificial giving, right? When we give sacrificially, we give not just kind of something that's easy to give away, but sometimes it hurts a bit to be able to give that much. And the third person we encounter in the story is the person we know best, Judas Iscariot, the traitor. And as we heard in the scripture, the chief priests and elders were conspiring to arrest Jesus and to quietly, quote unquote, dispose of him. But they were adamant that it didn't happen during Passover because Jesus had many followers. And the priests were afraid of what the followers might do. And a riot might break out that would draw the attention of the Romans, and the Romans might shut the entire festival down. So they thought it was better to wait. Then in comes Judas when opportunity knocked. John's gospel tells us that Judas was the treasurer of the group, and sometimes he helped himself to some of the money. He was also the one that complained the loudest when the oil that was worth more than a year's worth of wages was poured over Jesus' head. And Judas may have also been a zealot or a religious extremist who expected Jesus to overthrow the Roman occupiers. But when it turned out that Jesus wasn't that kind of king, Judas had had enough. He decided to betray Jesus and goes to the religious authorities with a proposal. You give me money and I will give you Jesus. And the chief priests and the elders, they were more than happy to oblige. For them, opportunity knocked, and his name was Judas. And of course, we know how the rest of the story goes. We know that Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss of all things. And after Jesus was arrested, Judas felt remorseful. So he goes back to the chief priests and the elders and tries to return the 30 pieces of silver. But the chief priests and the elders considered the silver unclean. It was blood money. And so they wouldn't take it back. But Judas discovers that trying to give the money back wasn't enough to stop his remorse. So the story tells us that he hangs himself. But I have to wonder what would have happened had Judas waited a couple of days. What if instead of committing suicide, he knelt at the feet of the risen Christ and asked to be forgiven? And do you think Jesus would have forgiven him? I certainly do. And if that had happened, the story of Judas would have been amazing for him to tell other people. And if Judas had simply surrendered instead of going to the religious authorities, I believe the story would have ended entirely differently. Judas would have lived to tell how out of his anger and greed he betrayed the Son of God. But when he confessed his sin, Jesus forgave, and his life and his legacy was forever changed. And so, friends, I believe that we too surrender all that we are and all that we have to Jesus. And when we do so, our lives and our legacy are changed. Surrendering to Jesus means being in relationship with God's people. Surrendering to Jesus means being extravagantly generous. And surrendering means being forgiven, even when we turn our backs on God. We fall on our knees and open our hearts to the one we have wronged, and forgiveness is ours. All it takes is surrendering our lives to Christ. So friends, this passage is about 3 people who encounter Jesus, and all of them are changed, but their stories point us to one message. We are meant to surrender all that we have and all that we are. We are meant to surrender to Christ. So friends, may you have a blessed and meaningful Holy Week. May you know that God is with you. And not only is God with you, God is for you. And I hope to see many of you at our Good Friday service.